Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another Mandalorian review video. And as always, today's upload will contain spoilers for the most recent episode of The Mandalorian. That is Chapter 14, The Tragedy. So if you haven't watched the episode yet, maybe do so and come back later. So, I'll probably title this episode something like how I think this could be The Mandalorian's most controversial episode of all time, and at least so far, I do agree with that. There have been episodes that I'd say have been less popular pretty universally. I think the Ice Spider one from this season is up there in that regard. And of course, there have been, I would say, many more episodes which people have pretty much universally liked, but today's episode, I think, has seen a mixed reaction. Let's talk about that, but I'll do a very brief plot summary first. So, somewhat surprisingly, the Mandalorian gets to Tython at the beginning of the episode. He finds the Seeing Stone, or whatever it's called, and Baby Yoda, Grogu, calls out to other Jedi across the galaxy. Of course, they're interrupted by the arrival of Boba Fett. Boba Fett and the Mandalorian, alongside Fennec Shand from Season 1, then team up to fight off Imperials. However, it is all for naught, as the child is eventually captured by Dark Troopers and frisked away to Moff Gideon's Arquitens, or at least his light cruiser, they've been calling it in this show. As this happens, the Razor Crest, the Mandalorian's noble steed, is also destroyed, and he teams up with Boba Fett, who had promised the protection of the child in exchange for his armor. At the end of the episode, we see Slave 1 bringing the Mandalorian to Navarro, because the Mandalorian needs help finding Bill Burr's character because he believes for some reason that he's the key to finding Moff Gideon. So that's the basic plot summary, but let's get on with my review, analysis, and reaction. So for the last two episodes, I've been kind of underwhelmed after my initial viewing. That was especially the case with this episode. However, with Chapter 13, the Ahsoka episode, I enjoyed the content much more on subsequent viewings, as I sort of appreciated the nuance in the art style and whatever else. Unfortunately, this episode didn't really do it for me with a second viewing, and I'm still pretty lukewarm on it. I didn't hate it, I liked the plot direction, but the episode itself felt pretty meh. There's a lot of reasons for this, and we'll talk about those specifically, but I want to start from the very beginning. Tython. So, Tython has really only been introduced one episode ago as a mythical home of the Jedi, and I gotta say it was pretty disappointing. I honestly thought going to Tython would be a bigger deal in this season. I made an episode about how it's a big deal that they're visiting the planet, and I'm sorry if I wasted your time when you guys watched that, but not only was the planet visually really boring, it looked like they were filming in like backcountry California, it also may not have even been in the deep core. There was some weirdness here. First of all, in the map, we see at the very beginning of the episode, there's two markers, one which is coreward, one which is a little further towards the outside of the map. So perhaps that's indicating a start and an end point. But there's also the scene when the Empire appears and Fennec Shand says the New Republic has control over the Outer Rim. All very weird, and I don't know why this show, which has been really good about lore, would change Tython's location. And as I discussed in that video I just mentioned, I think it's a really missed opportunity to not focus on the fact that this is a mystery world. This is somewhere secluded. It's in the deep core, you know? Going to Tython should have been a real change of pace for the Mandalorian, but it was really nothing, and the planet itself, as I mentioned, I felt was really boring. It should have been majestic and interesting as the ancestral home of the Jedi, but it just looked like something out of Star Trek the original series. It had a sort of fan film quality to it, which a little bit pervaded this episode, unfortunately. And that could just be directorial style. This one was made by Robert Rodriguez. I really like some of his movies, but they sometimes do have that too real feeling, which can be a little bit weird in a highly fantastical environment. Even Machete, which of course was over-the-top violent, felt a little weird just because of the tone of the movie. This is where some of the controversy comes in though, because my statement here is obviously completely subjective, and I understand why, on the other hand, a lot of people, especially Robert Rodriguez fans or fans of his style, really appreciated this sort of directing, and the tone of this episode and everything else just wasn't for me, and I think that's okay. I do still think though though, regardless of tone, they could have done a better job at making Tython more interesting. I'm not necessarily looking for the snow-capped Thoyor of Star Wars Legends, but the episode really should have slowed down just a little bit and given some time for things to get, dramatic and heady and whatever else. And I will say, a 32-minute runtime just doesn't work, at least if you're going to include really heavy action scenes. The show needs to be longer. The episodes probably need to be 40 minutes, and I do think it's no surprise that the first episode of the season, which was nearly an hour long, was almost refreshing in its pace. There was far too much going on in this episode. It ended up making, I think, parts of it a little bit clunky, so hopefully the last 2 episodes of this season are a little longer. But let's move on. I like the return of Boba Fett and Fennec Shand. I'm glad she wasn't killed off. I think it's a cool connection as well to a dropped plot thread, or what some people thought was a dropped plot thread from season 1. Again, we weren't really given any favors because of the length of the episode, and I think some of the writing suffered from that. It was a bit strange that the Mandalorian, for example, was told to take off his jetpack in the confrontation with Boba Fett, and that ended up being the thing stopping him from rescuing the child later on. Still, I thought Tamura Morrison did a fabulous job. He somehow managed to take the Jango that we knew from the prequels and the Boba Fett that we knew from the original trilogy and kind of blend them seamlessly. I'm really excited for what we see of him in the future. And there was that question of whether Boba Fett would be a antagonist to the Mandalorian or a buddy, a protagonist alongside him even. And yeah, the cards have been laid down unless there's a double cross here, which at this point, given the fact that Baby Yoda is in the Empire's hands, seems unlikely. He will be a force for good alongside the Mandalorian, and I like that. I'm curious to see more about his character, especially because a lot of the baggage from Star Wars Legends, which I wasn't always fond of, has now been dropped, and his future especially is pretty much an open slate. Aside from some of the weird filming choices on the planet itself, I'd say the first moment of the episode that I can remember myself sort of wondering about was the actual fight with the Stormtroopers. This was one of the weaker combat scenes in the Mandalorian period, in my opinion. This was a case where less would have been more. Basically, the Empire drops off 2 dropships worth of Stormtroopers, and they're essentially comic relief. They get killed brutally by our 3 heroes in this episode. They get smashed by boulders. They don't really have any tactics. There's never really any threat to them. A lot of the fighting just happens out in the open, with the good guys having faster reflexes than the bad guys, and that's not really something that I enjoyed. I think it would have been better if the Mandalorian and really the trio would have been working together, because the Mando spends most of the first part of the fight knocked out because of Baby Yoda's force field or whatever. I did, however, enjoy the sort of visceral violence of Boba Fett with his gaffy stick, just absolutely demolishing stormtroopers. That was pretty cool. I like the scene too where he suited up in his armor for the first time, and we can see that Cobb Vanth really had no idea what he was doing. I did a breakdown of all the features of Boba's suit actually after episode 1 if you guys are interested, but it was nice to see him use those knee launchers. I thought there was some cool action there. He took out those 2 transports. All of that was enjoyable, but again, it's too much just kind of blatant action that I didn't think was very thoughtful. Another major problem I had with this episode, and I'm surprised I have to say this, was the introduction of the Dark Troopers. First of all, I've got to say, I like the actual look of the Dark Troopers. They're pretty much exactly what I expected, but they didn't really do anything. The role could have been replaced by regular stormtroopers with jetpacks. We see in some of the final concept art at the end of the episode that originally they were supposed to be holding these miniguns. I think that would have been an improvement. I think they should have engaged the Mandalorian, Boba, and Fennec directly. They were just boring, and it's kind of disappointing because they are such cool characters. I don't want to be overly negative because the fact that we're getting Dark Troopers fighting with Boba Fett and the Mandalorian, and we just met Ahsoka and stuff is all really cool, but I want them to be used better if they are. Then Grogu's snatched, and we don't really get a reaction from the Mandalorian. I think this would have been an interesting moment for him to really show some emotion, but I'm guessing maybe we'll get that when they are, of course, eventually reunited. But it was a bit strange that he sort of just stood there, especially given the fact that we saw a softer side of him at the beginning of the episode. It was nice to see some capital ship action, though. It was cool that the Architans just straight up blasted the Razor's Crest. Personally, I was never a huge fan of that ship, so it didn't bother me any. I'm excited to see what the Mandalorian gets next. Maybe even Boba Fett will find Slave 2 and the Mandalorian will get Slave 1. I don't know. But yeah, moving on from that point, we get the conclusion, which I like. I'm not sure why Bill Burr's character is being brought back, but I assume the show will answer that question. And of course, unsurprisingly, the Gideon scenes at the very end were great. But this is what a lot of us expected to happen, I guess, at one point in the season, and we now have a better idea of where the season's going. So next episode, I assume, the second to last episode of the season, will feature the Mandalorian tracking down Bill Burr's character, and then I guess the final episode will be the retrieval of Baby Yoda, at least hopefully. All in all, I liked the way this episode went. I think it's really cool that the Mandalorian and Boba Fett are working together now. I hope Boba fixes up his armor and gets back completely into fighting shape. That would be awesome to see the two of them working together. However, the actual execution of this episode was off, and I feel like the use of Tython, or the misuse of Tython, was really a missed opportunity. But I don't want to be too negative. I don't want to focus on that. Let me know what you guys thought down in the comments. Am I wrong? Do you share some of the same feelings? Either response is cool. I look forward to reading all of what you guys post. But until next time, be safe, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.